It's completely ridiculous. It just doesn't seem to me to have anything to do with food at all, really. It's a piece of... I wouldn't even grace it with the name of food theatre. It's food pantomime.
Even in the 1950s, not everyone was impressed by Fanny's special kind of French food.
First famous in journalism under the name of bon viveur, they now establish personal contact with the vast audiences of stage and television. They kindly invited me to lunch, and this began, quite genuinely, with a sort of mishap that can and does happen to the best of cooks.
Oh, in French, it's called an assiette des fruits de mer, which I think is rather fun. It's really normal.
You realise they're moving?
No, it's genuinely
That must be the quality of the champagne, I think, probably.
Oh, winkles?
Yes.
Well, they've been boiled, dear, so if they are moving...
Well, one crawled off fair round together. Really?
Get champagne away from them.
I look quite absolutely.
Yes,
It's fell off. See, look, it's moving.
Give it to me. Oh, it's perfectly right. It is moving. You've got a live one that's fallen in here. It's about
No, there are quite a few. Waving their heads about it.
They're resuscitated.
If you notice, Fanny really is about promoting the virtues of French cookery. And in those days, French cookery was what everyone aspired to. You know, part of France's sort of cultural role in the world was being the home of great food. So a lot of what people were cooking at home for special occasions like dinner parties was French.
Fanny's affair with food didn't start with demonstrations. A self-taught cook, she became a prolific columnist for the Daily Telegraph and wrote many cookery books, children's books and novels. The end of wartime rationing brought a renewed interest in food and restaurants, and Fanny and Johnny wrote about it in their own style. They worked under the pen name of Bon Viveur. They should be trimmed and paper-frilled, not crusted with lips of congealing fat. Flour and kirsch for this famous brew, not cornflour and water as we have seen to our shuddering horror. This toast Melbourne menace is becoming terrible. In some of our largest establishments, dogs' bodies are...
All smart menus had the same food in them. They were all in French, and they all sounded very grand, you know, pheasant souverauf, sole bonne femme, melon frappé.
Yeah, it's all in foreign, isn't it?
Of course it's in foreign. It's a table d'hote, isn't it? French, a silly move.
French, silver service, classic, there's heavy sauces, and it was boring.
Life wasn't boring for Graham Kerr, who by the early 60s was discovering an exciting new world of food in New Zealand and Australia.
At the present moment, it looks almost like a sort of... You wouldn't think that you'd make a batter out of that, but all you need to do is add a little more beer to it and just give it a slosh up. Still a bit thick. Oh, well, yes. Another ounce of beer.
He introduced humor and laughter on the table, and that is important.
Sloshed on the pisco, there's going to be really blotto on
Graham Kerr was about the simple enjoyment of food. These were days before we worried about cholesterol, and his dishes had lots of batter, butter and booze. It was food to savour, fun, luscious and just a little bit sexy.
Well, that is sort of the batter. Let's have another drink of pisco. This is the Dean Martin show. I've quite forgotten what I'm going to do next.
Graham's interest in food started as a young teenager, helping the chefs in the kitchens of his parents' hotel in Sussex.
I remember acutely one time in which I was plucking parsley away from its stem in order to be able to get it free from the stem. And the chef said something quite rude about, don't pluck it, just chop it. And I said, but you don't do it that way. And there was this thud, a kind of whistling sound and a thud, and a sound business, and this large knife was sticking in the wall right by my face. I didn't know that the guy was a knife thrower, you know, in a circus or something before he became a chef. But he was very adept at doing this, you know, scaring young, snotty-nosed kids like me to death.
After a short stint at catering college, Graham was called up to do national service in the army. He ended up in the catering corps, ignoring his father's advice that he should learn something more useful.
The general officer said to me, why do you want to be in the Army Catering Corps? And I said, well, they told me to be positive, you see. And I said, well, you see, the food in the British Army is really so awful. And I think I'm just the chap to fix it. And I was 18. The sergeant major said, what's your name? And I said, my name's Kerr, sir. So what do you think you're capable of doing then? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm a company commander's clerk, or maybe you want to help the catering officer somehow. And he said, oh, yes, how lovely. I think he needs some help. So he said, change into your denims. And so I go down there. And I and one other guy are bashing pans for 1,800-man kitchen in the middle of summer. I cannot tell you what those cooks did to those pans.
After leaving the army, Graham decided to stay in the catering business, and he and his young bride, Trina, took over the management of a large hotel near London.
That was a tough time for both of us, because 22 years old and lots of work and not so much experience. We just wanted to get to a place where we could shut the door.
The Kerrs had had enough. To escape, he landed a new job as Chief Catering Officer for the Air Force in New Zealand. New Zealand television had just started, and Graham was asked to help fill the schedule with a little cooking.
It's a crazy experience of walking onto a set for the first time in my life. Only 2 cameras. And all I can say to you is it's still a blur, but they said, hold the omelette up underneath your chin so that we can run the titles at the same time over your face and the omelette. And then the guy went the wrong way on the zoom, and it went outward, so I was standing in the middle of the set. And the back of the set was a cherry tree, because there was another couple coming on after me who was going to sing springtime, springtime to each other. And so there were daffodils growing out of the studio floor, and a lamb, which had been rehearsed, had pooped, you know, between the dam. And here was I standing here with this omelette. Apparently it was hilarious. And it was written up as the best live show this week. But Trina was saying, you are the most unutterably boring man that you can possibly imagine in the whole world. And I was upset about that. I went down to my producer and I told him that Trina thought I was boring and I needed to be funny. And so I had done this dish with some boiled potatoes, and I'd put a piece of coal in with the boiled potato. And I said, you know, if you put coal in with boiled potatoes, they keep potatoes white because of the iron in the coal. I suppose you could call it coal storage. And I did that in rehearsal. He said, I love it, I love it, I love it. Now, all you need to do is to pick up the block of coal, hold it towards the lens, lift your left eyebrow, still can't do that, and say, you could call that coal storage. And I did it just like that. Well, I was so happy about this program because it was this funny time. So I went back and told Trina that I really wanted her to see this one. I really tried, and I think we've made some progress. And so it came to the coal storage, and she screamed. And you know, it was just like, you know, battery next door to somebody in the neighborhood was not used to this. And I'm trying to shush her up, and I said, look, if you're so clever, why don't you produce it then? She said, all right, I will.
It was Trina and her experience as an actress that helped turn Graham into an international success.
My part in this was very theatrical. I really knew Graham could go international. I thought that he was great if you could bring out the natural humor of Graham.
I'd like to introduce you to my special guest, Harry. I've named him after my manager. I'm the sucker on the end.